Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's webinar panel conversation about immersive audio. We're going to try to demystify some of the concepts around this buzzword, immersive, and then specifically for audio. Our host, Robb Allan, is waiting together with the guests. We have Sherif El Barbari from Elisa, Acoustics. We also have Ralf Zuleeg from DMB Soundscape. And then Hugo Larin will be representing SPAT Revolution for FLUX. And before we go there, I would like to just go over some housekeeping general rules which we apply in these webinars. Basically, the chat is disabled, as is video and audio for the attendees. If you want to ask the panel members any questions, there's a Q&A section which you can use. We will try to get to most of these questions, or at least to most of the topics by the end of the webinar. And we will maybe also do regular intervals where we can address some of these questions as they come along. So please don't hesitate to use that Q&A section. And I'm going to hand you over to our host, Robb Allan, who will start the introduction for the panel members. Have fun.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another one of our webinars. Amazing group of people from all around the world here today. I know we're all stuck at home in COVID. We're not doing as many concerts and events as we would like to do. But I was thinking, you know, it's quite important as we move out of this, how do we reinvent our industry? How do we keep our industry moving forward? And one of the ways that we can think about that is moving it forward in terms of this audio quality and is the conceptually and looking at object-based and immersive audio. And I invited some really interesting people along to talk about it. So first off, welcome everybody. I'm going to start with you, Sherif. How are you, man? Good to see you again. And where are you today?
Hey, Rob, how are you? I'm very, very pleased. Thanks for inviting me. I'm actually very excited to be since 6 months in the office in London in Highgate, the headquarters for Elisa of Acoustics. So yeah, it's a memorable day for me today as well.
Excellent. And what have you been doing for the last 6 months? Have you been keeping busy?
I've been extremely busy, and actually there's going to be very, very, very soon, within a couple of days, actually some exciting announcements. So yeah, we've been quite busy from home office, all of us. We managed to do a lot of work, and we'll be presenting something very soon.
Great, good. I'm glad you keep him busy. Hugo, how are you, man?
Hey, I am doing very good. Thank you for having me today. And I am live from Montreal, from our FLUX Immersive studio in Montreal, where I've been geeking in the last days. Again, you know, working on some, you know, software development stuff, you know, testing. So yeah, I'm actually been
I think
locking myself in this room.
I think you win the prize for most equipment around you so far on the webinar. But
yeah, I like to show off, you know. That's always no, really. It's I just got the luxury to have all this beautiful gear around me. So yeah, it's great.
Cool. And I'm guessing you've been working hard, even though you're locked down. You've been doing testing, been working on new software.
We're testing software advancement. Interestingly enough, you know, although there's not as many live concerts, the binaural conversation, you know, binaural streaming has been a popular subject. So we have tackled those conversations, you know, those workflows, looking at those workflows for streaming binaural audio. So yeah, so, you know, yes, we're all locked down. There's not many, you know, as many live shows in audience for that matter of fact. But yeah, there's, you know, people listening, you know, to content on headphones, and the binaural conversation is very interesting there where, you know,
yeah, I'm going to touch. I want to touch on that later for a personal reason and because just I think it's part of the wider conversation. Hey, Ralf, how are you? Good to see you, even if it's virtually.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just virtually. It's a little bit of a pity. You see me here in our company, and you see me in our usual demo room, which is now converted into a video facility to do kind of webinars and stuff like that. And like all the others, I believe, you know, even in COVID times, one has to work more than one expect. So, you know, you see the business is going down, but you have to, you know, just invent and, you know, evolution or just continue, you know, develop your systems and stuff like that. And we've spent, you know, quite some effort to do that. and I'm quite looking forward to what's coming up in the next couple of months from our side as well. Other than that, yeah, it's quite exceptional. I'm now in the company. I'm not sitting at home, usually in I call it my depression corner. We just sit in front of your little telly and try to talk to the world. And I tell you, after 6 hours of being there, you're just done. You're just naked, and you have to go out and do something else. Interesting times, I have to say, but we are still there, and we have some bloody good ideas for the future.
Yeah, I think that's for all. I think we speak for all the manufacturers. And in some ways, it's been a time to take a little breath, to maybe have a think about the direction that we're all going, to make sure we're going in the right direction, and just kind of work on the software and stuff, and without as much distraction. I mean, I'd rather be out doing gigs, and I'd rather be out working with people at gigs, but in a way, we've had a little pause to get them, to have a little think about where we were going. Chris and I have been doing a lot of testing and stuff as well. So Hugo, how did you get? Just give us a little bit of background. How did you get into Immersive? I know that you've got a support background and organizational background. Just tell me how you ended up in the FLUX team.
Yeah, well, it actually started, from, beta testing. I, got to know the FLUX team from their analyzer software years ago. Some of you may know me from my Avid live sound background as an instructor and as a support person for Avid live sound here in Canada. But that was really my segue into getting to figure out what's going on at FLUX. And then, discovered, this FLUX IRCAM Spat Revolution project that was going on, making a standalone, product, and me coming from the live sound, the natural there was, just to figure out how do we fit this in the live sound workflow, for example. So that was, my first connection to Immersive, to FLUX specifically anyway. Prior to that in my career, back, I guess, 20 years ago, I was, like to talk about, some sound installation, that we're doing 20 years ago. And I was, there on the system engineering side, trying to figure out how to do audio routing for some actual immersive experiences. But yeah. So yeah, at FLUX, I play a role right now of, a product owner and evangelist in a lot of ways, and directing what we call the FLUX Immersive Consulting Group, so technical services around deployments of such systems. So yeah.
Cool. Very interesting. Sherif, you and I go back a ways. We were knocking around the old London roadie scene in the late 80s and 90s and around Britannia Row and stuff, done some shows together. So how did you get from being front of house engineer? Actually, I remember you as one of the first people involved in flying line arrays and stuff. I learned a lot from you about that. How did you go from there to Immersive, or was it a direct route?
Well, it goes a long way back, actually. I think all of us, we started this because of the passion of music, because of the passion of trying to bring really great experience to yourself for a start, and hopefully for a lot of people around you as well in the audience. So at really very early days, probably back in the late 80s, touring with artists, I started to put up some surround speakers around the venues, especially for people that are not in the premium area in front of the stage or closer to front of house, just to give them a little bit more excitement, because they're far away from the performance. And this is maybe a dream come true of mine, to be able to contribute into this immersive sound experience, because one of my really first amazing experience shows with the best ever immersive system only on the front of the stage was with the Grateful Dead. I think I like to mention that because this was definitely very impressive to watch the Grateful Dead in front of the pyramids in Cairo back in the late 70s with their wall of sound, where each musician had a PA just behind him reproducing his instrument. And this is definitely the absolute optimal way of perceiving a show.
It's like the kind of muscle car of immersive audio, right?
It is like really a dream come true to have experienced that and then be where I am today, to try and at least get close to the experience that I had back then. So when I have been like, there is always luck, there's always fortunate coincidences. And when Christian Heil, the founder and president of Aid Acoustics, approached me and asked like whether I would be up for getting on this boat and bringing something new to the industry, it was like, I won't say the exact answer right now because that would be inappropriate. I don't know whether there are maybe.
I don't know if it's probably PG, rated. Yeah.
No, but yeah, it's a great experience and an amazing long way that we embarked on.
I think all of us are enthusiasts first, right? That's the most important thing.
We love playing. I mean, we really love playing, experimenting, and just coming up with new ideas just to keep us interested.
Cool. So Ralf, I know that you actually worked with one of the kind of founding fathers of the whole kind of concept, right? A lot of the concepts come from East Germany, right? With
it's coming from East Germany. There was a group of acousticians. I think one of which is still quite famous in the audio world is Dr. Wolfgang Arnold and his colleague Dr. Fels, and they invented in the late 70s. They invented a technology which was called delta stereophony, which was pass-link stereophony, and you used loudspeakers and you took the original sound and then you just overdelayed a little bit of a speaker, and then you just got the impression that everything is coming from its origin. And I heard a show like that the first time on the Lake Constance in Bregenz, in the show, I believe it was Aida, where you had, ships going through, or boats going through the sea, and, the sound was exactly following the thing and stuff like that. And I thought, this is amazing. And I started, then in the late 80s, in my Hamburg times, I traveled a couple of times to Eastern Berlin, to take part of the seminars of Dr. Arnold. And I experimented myself with delta stereophony a little bit. And I had to figure out that, I had to find out and to say, this is not reproducible. This is far too complex for an ordinary person. You can never make that happen, not reproducible, not reliable. A couple of years later, now we came across, another technology. We call that, wavefield synthesis and all this stuff, although this is not what we are doing, but it was another technology which has given us the possibility to have, defined loudspeaker setups.
Right.
And computer is calculating exactly that sound fields onto a fragmented loudspeaker setup, and gives you the impression of the origin and the setup and the events on stage. I took a device like that, and I put it in a club for a couple of years to just learn how to play. We had different bands on the thing. And then this went into DMB audiotechnik and became DMB Soundscape.
Wow. Yeah. Very, very nice route through all of that. And we have a very good friend of ours, Carsten, who was on our last webinar, and he was talking about using the stereophony, and he uses that when he's mixing. He's famous for mixing orchestras. He actually has some great videos on YouTube if you want to have a look, everybody. But he goes into some details about the old delta stereophony system, and very interesting a way that you can do it without all of the huge technology that we're talking about here. So before sorry,
you have to imagine that if you go in, for instance, in the old reverberation extension system in the Semper Opera in Dresden.
Yeah,
this was built analog. There was no digital computer built in. This was all built analog with condensers and resistors, and to build in the delay for the different loudspeakers to make that happen. So it goes far back, before even the proper computer, appeared.
Fantastic. And I bet it sounded amazing as well. All those beautiful microphones and stuff that he had back in the day in East Germany. So listen, before we get deeper into it, let's just do a quick kind of once around the company and just a definition. So, start with you, Hugo. Hugo, how do we define immersive audio? What, is that even the right word for it?
The famous question, right? Spatial audio, immersive audio. Immersive audio has been kind of a marketing word in my book. I mean, well, ultimately, we're talking about a rendering tool that allows us, to use various, spatial audio or immersive audio technologies, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking of going beyond this concept of channel base, which is right a stereo system, for example, a 5.1, and actually moving into something that we call object-based mixing. So those objects, being a single track or an actual stems, are being mixed in a virtual environment. Really, ultimately, what we're doing in immersive is that we're moving to a virtual, room, and we're rendering this on an actual, speaker arrangement, or in ambisonic, or in, binaural audio. There's obviously various, techniques and technologies there. But at the base, immersive spatial audio, you want to call it surround, if you want to call it surround, for that matter of fact. I guess we could still accept that word. But yeah, it's, to me, it's, moving beyond the channel base and being agnostic. You're basically, your first mixing is actually being agnostic of an actual channel, a left, a right, LCR, call it whatever.
Of a bus. It's getting past the bus, right?
Past the bus, yeah.
So do you want to jump in on that, Sherif, and say, we're moving beyond the pan pot with this, right?
Yeah, I think from my point of view personally, I think immersive audio to me describes liberating, let's say, the engineer, but also the audience from thinking about speakers, from thinking about anything technical, but just have the experience to listen to a performance, whatever this may be, in any space, and just perceiving this in a natural way and forgetting about microphones involved or speakers. I think one of my absolute amazing experiences was in the early days of Elisa, even before it was introduced. We had a concert with 3 classical guitar players and a percussion player. And we had this concert in a club in Paris with about 400 people. And during this concert, we decided, okay, we want to try Lisa for that, because one of the guitar players is actually the director of acoustic speaker systems development at Ale Acoustics. It's his band. So the musicians had these speakers behind them on stage, and you were listening to really complicated patterns and things that 3 classical guitar players are playing at the same time with this percussion player. And you cannot imagine how, like, when the jaws drop and you just experience the music and what each player is playing at any time. If anyone plays a solo or anyone just plays a riff, you immediately look at him, not because, let's say, you have a visual cue because there is a spotlight or whatever, just because you hear the content coming from the person playing. So to me, immersive audio is really getting into this state of, no matter where you are in the performance audience area, you just enjoy a performance and don't really perceive the technology.
Right. So I guess because tonally three classical guitars occupy the same kind of tonal space, and in a traditional system you'd have to either pan them left and right using volume, and then you would hear it differently, different sides of the audience. Yeah.
Compress
Fiddle
and
with
do all
EQ.
that.
Yeah.
And the real great benefit when you are liberated from this mixing with a pan pot and just mixing to a left and right where you perceive just the optimal let's say, spatialization, if you wish, for that purpose. When you're set in a certain position, you actually can retain the clarity and the natural sound of each of the instruments. You don't have to segment the frequency range that you have for everything to divide it in between all that. As you say, they have similar frequency ranges for all three guitars, and you still can keep this all as natural as possible without masking each other. I think we might also refer to this famous, pub, when you're in a pub and a lot of people are speaking, and you can focus on something because you hear it from a direction where you're hearing it from. So that pretty much describes this experience, which is great in just enjoying a performance without the limitations. That's the liberating part of it.
Right. And Ralf, it affects you emotionally as well, right?
It is for me, the matter of proximity, being close to, what's happening on stage, just not being, have the feeling being far away, which you have if you're listening to a channel-based system. I'm still struggling a little bit with all the names and expressions that we just have: 3D audio, spatial audio, immersive audio. I think the meaning of those words is in the meantime quite diffuse. 3D is coming from cinema and 3D televisions. Spatial audio, I think what does it really mean? For me, we creating, and this is what is in the name of what we are using, we creating soundscapes. And soundscape is what you experience every day. You're getting out of even at night, you're getting out of your house, and you have the soundscape around you. There's cars, there's what have you, people around you, and this is not coming just from one spot. It's always all around you. So if you want to put it like that, you're immersed every day, but you don't recognize it anymore because it's part of your life. And what we are doing is, with Soundscape, is we try to recreate exactly that impression in a sound system, which means the audience and the listener is completely released from concentrating and trying to put two pictures together. You have a singer over here in the center of the stage, and the sound is coming from there, from the left-hand side, somewhere out of the sky. This doesn't go together, because this is completely disconnected. If you have the singer over here, the sound should come from the origin of the source. Where you see it, there you should just locate the origin of the sound as well. And this is but it's relaxing the listener. He doesn't have to calculate in his brain two different informations together. And with that, you can really create then an artificial world, which is really, taking the audience into, a completely different mood. They are completely, immersed, and then this meaning this word makes sense. They're immersed by the sound. They are immersed and taken into a different planet, and they are away from the reality for some time. And I think this is the big advantage of, systems that we just want to use right now: audio, spatial audio systems, soundscape systems, Elisa, what have you, just to bring the audience into a different world. And as I said once to you, whilst you're playing with soundscape, is the goal is achieved when you stand behind a front of house or somewhere in the venue, and you can't hold back your tears because you're so dragged into what's happening that you forget about the rest. And I think this is what we want to achieve with systems like that.
I kind of want to achieve that in a lot of things in my life. That moment where you just kind of go beyond the inner voice and you're just lost in the moment, right? Sometimes I have different hobbies. I've got a little vegetable garden. I go sailing, and I'm always looking for this moment where you stop the kind of inner dialogue and you lose yourself. And I think perhaps immersive makes that easier because you're not thinking about the speakers, you're not thinking about the mix. You somehow that they just kind of disappear. Are you with me, Hugo? Is that would be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, totally fair. I'm not too sure exactly what to add on this. I think, you're totally, I was actually on a tangent here thinking of the conversation of Ralph. So I'm going to continue on that one about,
Yeah,
the actual audience, because we're talking about the audience there. But I
sure.
even, for me, the technologies and what we're talking here actually applies to artists on stage as well, because, that, delivering that soundscape, right, to an audience. Well, imagine delivering this on stage, and it has a total impact on the performance, forgetting that you're connected here and, delivering a left, right, which is not the way that you hear as a human. And now as an artist on stage, you're reconnecting with the band members, with the team. So anyway, yeah, I know it's not the exact question, but
No, but
I was
it's,
very focused. I was very much focused on that kind of conversation there in my
yeah.
brain. So,
Well,
yeah,
as audio professionals, we have two jobs, right? One is to make the artist happy, and secondly, maybe probably more importantly, is to make the audience happy. And I think any tools that we have moving forward that helps in either of those departments is really important, right? It's really important because that connection between the audience and the artist is important, and that's what we're all missing right now. The whole planet is missing this communing together, and whether it's in a field or a concert hall or something. And I think Ralph's onto something when he says that there's an emotional, it triggers a more emotional response. You get lost in it.
I think in the theater world, it's called suspension of disbelief.
That's it. Yeah. So one of the things that I thought about this coming out of the lockdown, I don't know what, it just popped in my head really, is, one of the things when cinema was threatened, right? When cinema, they said, with home cinemas and with DVDs and with downloading them from the internet, people are going to stop going to the cinema. So what did the cinema do? It upped its production values, right? It used immersive audio, it used bigger screens, it used better definition. And is this a way forward for us in our industry? Sherif, is this a way to kind of pull people back in? Is this a way to bring people back into the concert world?
So the great benefit actually from cinemas and what people are nowadays, let's say even in their home cinemas or in their home audio systems are, let's say, used to, this has moved our at least attempt to bring this higher quality, this emotional connection to an artist on stage. It has definitely raised the bar considerably for what people expect when they go and visit a concert, having had these experiences in movie theaters, in larger movie theaters, where the technology has really been moving forward, whilst in our live sound market, we were still, let's say, constrained to what we were allowed to do, not to mask the visuals and not to mask, let's say, the all the retinal distractions from the music. All what is really important in a musical performance is the music, and this brings us back to prioritize what it's really all about. The actual value of listening to a concert or to a performance is to get this emotional connection to what a performer, what a creative person actually is bringing to you. And the better you can transform this into an experience with whatever means. It's a canvas that we actually paint on, and everyone in the audience has his own look at this canvas and can just focus on what he has, let's say, finds most appealing to him. So definitely the immersive audio getting into the live performances, into shows, is a road that has already started a few years ago
Yeah.
and has benefited from the technology in movies, in home theaters, and is more and more even expected when you go to visit a concert, to not have just, let's say, the poor, emotionally poor experience if you're set somewhere and you're just magnetized to the source of where the speaker closest to you is providing you with information. You want to just forget about all that and just be fully pulled into the performance. And that is something that will help this definitely move forward and will give us the power really to impose, let's say, the necessary rules to make this happen. I'm convinced that there is no way back from moving in this direction, and we will hopefully very, very soon we'll be back in the theaters, in the arenas, in the stadiums, you call it, where we will be able to bring this experience to the people in real life and not
Yeah, I hope so.
only.
Because one of the fears that I have is we're going to come back, but we're only going to have half houses and stuff, and how can we make it economically viable? And one of the thoughts I had would be that maybe we could charge a premium if we have this kind of immersive experience. So it's not just not just going to another gig where we can more or less hear the kick drum and the vocal and everything's great, but we're going to be. Sorry, jump in, Hugo. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but if I may add to this as well, when you're looking at live productions today, look at how, video has raised the bar with mapping and the tracking and the lighting. Sounds like all the departments have been, building up using the latest technology, and then, oh, well, what? Let's disconnect, the audience and stacking just, two big bananas on the left, right of the stage, and kind of forget, we audio, the poor child, not necessarily, or the afterthought. Oh, we need to have audio, and I think that this is what we've got now. We've got this opportunity. The technologies, they're more mature than ever, and yeah, it's audio. To me, it's audio stepping up in the production, getting early in the production, planning. To actually, and obviously to the ultimate, result of getting an audience to connect really to what's going on, and just visually, from, what I see on stage, what I have visually that's impressing, but audio-wise as well.
Yeah, because
we can probably take that a step further. I mean, I remember always the expression after the release of the CD, we want to have it sounding like a CD, but hey, to be honest, do you want to go to a show, pay 120 pounds or euros or what have you, to listen to a CD? No, I want to have a special experience. I want to go there and experience something else which I cannot reproduce at home in this dimension, right? I mean, if you go to the cinema, and this is the example you brought earlier, it is larger than life. You're sitting there and you are dragged into an artificial world, and you're off, the reality. And exactly that is what we want to achieve in live sound as well. We want to, move the people, away from their usual thinking. We want to move them out of reality into an artificial reality. And with just a stereo system and, a proper sound, I think this is not enough to achieve that, or just for a very limited amount of people in the hall. So taking this effort and putting in a spatial sound system, I think, has the benefit that you provide a very, very unique and special experience, which you can only experience there if you go there.
Yeah. So, Sherif, jump in.
No, it's fine. I was just saying, like, that is absolutely a valid point. That I mean, taking someone and drowning someone in an artificial world maybe goes a little bit beyond my opinion in that matter, but I think it's just making someone really fully connected to what he's hearing. If you're listening to a classical orchestra, or if you're listening to an opera, or if you're watching a play, that certainly brings your mind into places. But still, I like the connection to the reality and to the naturalness of all that to be maintained as well.
Yeah. So, because as human beings, right, we have this connection between our visual sense and our oral sense. It's a survival mechanism, right? If something's sneaking up behind me, I want to be able to tell what direction it's coming from. And if something's running at me, you know, an example I always use is if you hear the sound of a mouse running towards you, but you see an elephant, you're going to believe your eyes more than you're going to believe your ears, right? And you're going to get out of the way. But, so, you know, there's this huge connection, and there's been a disconnect, right? Like as somebody said earlier, you're sitting in the arena, you're listening to the stage right second delay, and that's the only thing that you're hearing. And somehow there's this thing happening, and there's a big TV screen over there, and you're kind of watching the TV screen, and there's a big disconnect, right? Does Immersive help us connect the visual to the oral, Ralf?
What? Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You know, the immersive sound is just you know merging the visual and the oral pictures together clearly. Yeah, and if no matter where you are in the venue, you don't hear the same everywhere, but you get the right perspective. And I believe if you're thinking about the complete production, which includes light, video, and audio. If this all goes together at an early enough stage, you can just produce something so fantastic that exactly that what I just mentioned earlier will happen. You can't hold back your tears because it's just something else.
It was beautiful. Me and Ralf had a little moment in Stuttgart a little while ago.
I'm wondering about that. Tears in my eyes and all that. Like,
yeah, it's a beautiful song, Paradise Circus in Immersive. Yeah, it was a special thing. Hey, so Sherif. Okay, it's great. I think pretty much everybody on this call is thinking, yeah, this is amazing. I want to mix an Immersive because apart from anything, I'm not stuck to this basically mono, which I've been stuck in it for 20 years. The problem is persuading the artist and the production to go along with it, right? And I had quite a fair bit of pushback on it when I proposed it for a band that I was working with. Have you got any thoughts on that? Is there a way that we can persuade the artist? Is there a way we can persuade the production that this is what they should be doing?
So I definitely say hearing is believing. When you hear really what the quality that you can get, what the experience that you can get, and the connection that you can get from utilizing such a technology, I think, I mean, you've been to our lovely showroom here before. I have seen hundreds of people in here. There is not a single person that experienced this going out and saying, I don't know. No, I think these guys are crazy. I mean, we are crazy in a way, but we're really crazy and passionate about bringing this experience to the most people in the audience. So when we invite people, let's say, to listen or to experience that, there is definitely immediately I need to have this. The doubts come a little bit from another direction, like, can I afford this? How much is this going to cost? And the technology that this involves, like, will it be feasible to drag this technology around, set it up and all that? So
yeah, that was the pushback I got was, oh man, it's going to take a long time. You need way more fly points. Normally the left right hangs, they can be getting on with that while they're doing the video and the lights and stuff.
But now Rob, I mean, we've really proved it over the past few years. We've done really big, largest arena tours with a large ELISA system.
Yeah.
And we proved it again and again that the load in and the load out of such a system is achievable within all the limitations that we live within for decades. And I think we have been able to make huge productions load in and load out. I'm not even referring to ELISA right now or to immersive systems, but we load in let's say 4 to 5 hours, do a show, load out in an hour, and we have done that with ELISA because there are people that are specialized in optimizing all these processes. There are stage managers, the production managers. They put together teams that are highly specialized in optimizing all this. So when you focus all this talent in optimizing a show to load in an immersive system, no one has waited for, let's say, an immersive system in the tours that we have done to be up and running, and no one has had to sleep less because the loadout of an immersive system lasted for much longer. In contrary, it has been exactly within the same time scale that is usually for these productions. So even what we look at as well is the actual budget. People are afraid, yes, you need much more motors, you need much more crew, you need much more space, but that is not true because everything scales differently, everything is approached differently, and we take good care as well of making sure that the scaling happens within what the production needs. I think a lot of the budgets nowadays maybe are for even just a normal system are at a point where the system is so highly over-specced that the budgets are quite high. We try to spec the system that really does the job correctly, and we have done all tools and means of really assessing exactly these points because we know that money talks at the end. If it costs 3 times as much as your normal production, you will be having a really hard time to convince even the most audio-minded person to take such a system out. So yeah, if the budget, let's say, the budget can be higher, but if it's within like 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 times, for the benefit that the audience gains from that, for the benefit that the artists gain from that because of how the reaction of the audience is, how connected the audience are, this emotional feedback from the audience, of course, goes immediately to the artists as well.
I think that's a specific kind of artist as well, right? You know, we had the whole, remember the whole Spice Girls thing and all that, and a lot of that was about they built the stage, they built the set, they built the thrust stage out into the audience. Then at the end of it, they go, oh yeah, so we got to put the speakers somewhere. I suppose we could put some over there and some over there. So, like somebody else said earlier on, we need to get in earlier in a production, right? We need to get in at the beginning and kind of stake our claim for some from real estate as well.
It might be a matter of experience and evolution as well. I mean I have a personal theory, which is that the bad reputation of loudspeakers that we normally face when we're going out into a theater, where have you loudspeakers can go there and there and move them further out. We don't want to see them. It's coming solely from that they are too disconnected. This is what we just discussed all the time, that the normal channel-based system is quite disconnected to what's happening on stage. So, but if you're thinking about sorry, lamp piece, have you ever seen a beautiful lamp hanging in front of a stage? I haven't seen one, right? But they are, part of the show, where if we bring our speakers in as part of the show, all of a sudden they becoming a part of the stage set. And I think, this is an evolution of time that is required to make them understand that sound is part of the entire machine that we just put together.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe he has to go back to having a more central role. Like when Sherif was talking about concerts in the 70s, there'd be like 4 par cans, right? And with your band, there'd be one of those, like a little, what those things when you have the oil in the water in the spinning wheel, that'd be about the entire thing of the lighting. So, yeah, we need to get back to bringing audio to the middle of a concert. Sorry, Hugo, we've been talking about concerts a lot. I'd like to speak to you about kind of installation, because I know you guys have been involved in all kinds of other stuff. You've been involved in museums. You've been involved in one of those places where you look at stars and stuff, right? So, what's the
planetariums?
Planetarium, thank you.
Sound experiences. I mean, you know, the old immersive, you know, or spatial audio thing has been going on for a while. Obviously, you know, the install, you know, and these experiences, you know, have the advantage of, you know, quite some, you know, pre-production time. They're burning in something, and they don't have to deal with all the live reality that, you know, that we're talking here as well. But yeah, we've been involved there. What's interesting that, you know, is that, you know, what we found is that, you know, there's not some specific workflow established. It's a bit no man's land still, you know, there, because guys are experimenting with, you know, different DAWs, different plugins. They've got that luxury, you know, the Max MSP of this world, and doing crazy things and integrating sensors and tracking and this. There's quite a lot going on this world. So but you know, relating to our world of live production a bit, you know, in some ways, what I think is going on right now is, you know, workflows are being defined, common grammar, like it's all coming together to, you know, to make to get to a point where, you know, we can think about, you know, doing this, you know, walk up to you know, an immersive system, or to deploy, you know, some fairly complex, you know, systems for a single show, you know, for a one nighter in and out. But the install world, you know, if we talk about install, we can talk about, you know, as well, the theatrical production, you know, that have been, you know, pushing this. We could talk about, you know, what Cirque du Soleil and all these guys been doing, the Disney, you know, using various strategies, you know, it's
even
not
in
like
game
it's
parks
new,
and stuff, right? You've been using all these kind of
games,
to just enhance that experience. And audio makes a great audio in a game park or in a museum. When you see an exhibit, I saw an exhibit about something to do with whales, and the audio was incredible, you know. It enhances the experience massively, right?
Yeah, exactly. Again, connecting, you know, I was, you know, hearing about some recent things in Disney, you know, that they were doing, and someone actually, you know, sat down at that ride and just couldn't believe the experience was getting out of it. And that's just by, you know, some sound designers, you know, just, you know, really digging in the different technology that's available to do it. So yeah, it's been very interesting. Now, obviously, their difference there is often in install, they end up creating and bouncing, you know, something, and then it's more of a, you know, playing out. This obviously doesn't have to deal with as much of the live reality that, you know, we may be doing. There's some exceptions, some integrate some tracking and some live processing, but a lot is premeditated in this way, you know.
Sure.
But so the workflow is different, but yeah, it's exploding, you know. We see it. I see concerts as well, you know, people wanting to do concerts in these domes, these planetariums, or these, you know, 60 speaker domes, and actually doing concerts in it with some visual production in 360, you know, all around you. So yeah, it's exploding in all ways.
It's exciting times, man. I'm really kind of crazy keen to get out and start experimenting with some of the stuff. I mean, what Chris and I, you know, our involvement in all of this is you know, we work on the SXL development, and we've been trying our hardest to keep ahead of the wave. And it felt to us a couple of years ago, this whole kind of immersive audio was important, and we've been integrating the plugins for all of your companies right into the desk, right? And actually, Chris, I don't know if you can show that. Can you show that? Just, throw you in the deep end. Can you, Chris? Can you add?
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, I think so. Hold, stand by. Let's bring this up. Hopefully, let me know once this pops up.
Yeah, we're looking at the GUI.
Yeah. So if I go to, I mean, here, there's the Alisa control plugin. I'm not actually, by the way, connected to any processing units. I'm just looking at the plugins. So there's the Lisa source control plugin. There's the DMB Soundscape one, and there's a SPAT Revolution one. I mean,
and you can control that straight off the desk, right? So it's all about integrating. It's all about integrating the whole engineer's experience of working in immersive into the workflow, right?
So you were talking just a couple of minutes ago about workflows and about experiential shows, and this is actually quite a good example of how these shows are demanding for, let's say, pre-production, for you won't be able to actually go into the venue, the final venue where this is all happening, and spend 6 months in that venue to program all what you need to program with all the crazy things that are happening for such an experiential exhibition, if you wish. So this is, I think, a big part as well of our task, how to make these approaches manageable. We know that sound engineers really have a lot on their plate, and they have a lot to deal with, and so we don't want to overcomplicate their lives, but we want to give them the possibility to be creative, to play, and to bring really amazing experience to their productions. Of course, we think a lot about how you can prepare for such a show, how you can pre-program your content, how you can, let's say, from the pre-production space, which most likely will be smaller, how you can scale up from that space but be arriving already at your target destination, at your target venue, with almost, I would even say, 75 to 80% of your mixing and preparation and programming work done. And we have done that over the past few years by mocking down this system into something, let's say, with maybe less speakers, with smaller speakers, with doing a lot of tuning and calibration to this mock-down system. And once you actually program your show in there and then you scale it up to the actual venue, you will need to do refinements, but these are minimal compared to how much time it would take you if you had to actually do that in that space. And
I was going to ask you guys about that, because you probably can see behind me, this is my little home studio. My main speakers are out just to make room for cameras and stuff, but I sit here at home in a lift with, I've got really good Genelec speakers that are normally here. I mix my left and right. I can sit here and mix all day long, and I often do. That's my wife. And then I take that to an arena, and there's a left and a right, and you know, man, I'm like 99% ready to go. And that was one of the things I wanted to speak to you guys about. Is like, there's a lot of people who do touring or sound designers, I know as well, in the theatre world, who do this kind of work in their own studios, and that's going to be a bit more of a challenge, isn't it? Like you say, we get 70% there. Okay, how do I change my little left-right studio behind me?
I was mentioning before, like, there are some exciting things coming up. There are things that we really think a lot about exactly these topics. I mean, if we present the audience with an amazing experience, we have to remember also who's behind this amazing experience. Is on the first hand, of course, the musicians, but also the creative person that is, in my opinion, part of this music producing machine, if you wish, which is the engineer, the mixing engineer, the creative engineer. So we are actually presenting soon some tools that would allow you really to be able, as you mentioned, from your home studio to be preparing your mixes. I would probably not reveal too much if I said, like, even without using speakers, but I will keep that a little bit fuzzy. But with smaller speakers as well, you would be able to do that easily from your home environment, with a lot of the actual final product already being part of all this creation and taken into account for, and just simplifying the transition to the maximum possible way.
Because that's another big selling point. You need to be able to make sure that the engineers are happy to stand behind this thing, and not to have that moment that first time there's no master fader in Immersive, right? But the first time you unmute the channels, and it has to be kind of someplace in the ballpark, right? Hugo, I know you guys are working on that, right? I'm sure you're going to be working on some clever solution to this.
Well, and we have been doing some, with virtualizing speaker arrangements, for example. But can I talk 2 seconds about my dream? I'll talk about my dream for 2 seconds. I'll make it quick. This old thing about, object-based, and people are probably wondering, okay, so I'm going to be moving to an object-based, and I'm be moving to maybe a specific speaker arrangement of a frontal 7 or 9 boxes, but I don't have these boxes, and I can't really do my pre-production. So that's the first question. And what about when I'm going to have to turn back to a stereo because that leg is only a stereo, or I get an LCR tonight, or I'm in the studio, or I even push this to, the new norm is actually to stream binaural audio as well from these concerts now, because there's no audience. There's only 2 other people in the venue. So obviously the binaural conversation comes in. And to me, my dream is, and I don't know if I'm going to see this from my life now, probably, but if you move to object-based, I talked earlier about the fact that you become agnostic of an actual format. And that's the key to, well, great. Today I'm in my studio. I have 2 speakers. Well, you can actually, put that that object base in a stereo arrangement, or in binaural, or virtualize. We've got these tools, binaural audio, but we actually have ways to virtualize a front of 7 speakers, virtualize some rear boxes. And we have that in Spat Revolution. We've been doing quite a bit on the binaural front. But to me, moving to object base does not necessarily mean, creating something specific for a show for speaker arrangement. It's, opening to, sources, space, building a soundscape really, and then rendering this on the speaker arrangement of the day. And if the speaker arrangement or my monitoring tool of the day is a pair of speaker, and then if I move, to the plane because I want to do some some stuff, I can actually do it on ears and binaural. And then maybe I move to a studio and I happen to have a quad speaker or a 5.1 or a 7 or a larger arrangement with better resolution, to actually achieve my monitoring goals. But so I would love, obviously there are some challenges on moving, because you're definitely not mixing the exact same way when you're trying to push everything down the 2 bananas, and EQing and the dynamics. There's quite some things that are changing, but that maybe just means releasing a preset that releases some of your dynamics and some of your EQing. So I like to think that this could be possible. To me, object-based mixing and moving to immersive is not necessarily creating something specific to an arrangement, but can be very much agnostic. And tonight, guys, we're just doing a live streaming from that radio station. Your same pre-production work is all applies. Go to binaural mode and just stream that thing.
It's also matter, that your algorithm that you're using in your renderer is kind of scalable. And we have done a couple of things right now to just go from very small to quite large, and using the same kind of mix. So for instance, just to produce a headphone mix, I just put in virtually 2 speakers, and I just did my normal object-based mix on 2 tiny speakers. And all of a sudden, you get the same impression as you would get from a bigger system as well. It gives you the same kind of resolution, transparency, things that you expect from a spatial system like that, from the effort you have to put in. And if the system is scaling, from 2 to 3 to 5 to 7, and the algorithm is kind of able to cope with it, there's of course, adjustments necessary. But in principle, it has to, maintain the idea of what you have just put together within the renderer. And if that is possible, I think it's half of the rent already that you're required to do that. And I'm experimenting. I have a couple of recordings where I just used our algorithm on 2 speakers instead of 5 or 7.
Listen, I've just realized we've been speaking for nearly an hour, and I very rudely haven't asked Chris to see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm enjoying so much this conversation. I just completely forgot I'm supposed to do that. Chris, you got some good questions for us?
There's some really good conversation going on. I think a lot of it is being addressed. It varies from binaural to how do I get started in immersive? How do I approach immersive? What do I do if I sit at home and I want to prepare a mix, stuff like that. So I'll just cherry pick a couple. I thought maybe to generalize it, a lot of questions are about workflow. What would be a typical immersive audio workflow specific for a live sound scenario? How would you approach a mix like that?
So let me, can I answer this one? Because I've done a little bit of this.
Okay.
So, and I think I might do it simpler. Basically, instead of sending all of your channels to the left and the right, you send a direct out from every channel to a box. And in that box, you move those objects around in space. So there's no left, right master, and there's no EQ. You just, each individual channel or a group, it could be a group of channels, is a little object in space. And that space is rendered by the box to its relative position in the speakers using lots of clever technology that these people understand more than me.
Where I wanted to jump on, is actually, you're already anticipating that all the work has been done and you're ready to play. But the way I understood the question was like, how do I get to use immersive sound? What's the workflow? I think there are many steps before that, other than convincing the producer and the musician, and other than getting the budget for that. I think it's really important to be able to, let's say, design a speaker system that will fulfill something in the space that you're aiming at. So the way is like, you cannot just throw speakers in some positions and then think, okay, I will take the direct outputs and send them somewhere. I think you have to have a system that really allows you to make what you think, if you want to hear something from there. So you have to cater for this possibility to be able to position something in these locations if we're talking about speaker systems and about live performances. So you need first the tool to be able to design a system, and you need the tools that will make you able really to assess the performance of that system, to see how the coverage will be like for the audience that you're targeting. It's a whole, let's say, chain of things that you need as your workflow to get to the moment when all this is done. You have to be sure when you move something in a certain location that you will be able to perceive it from that location with a certain frequency response, with a certain bandwidth, with a certain contour, if you wish, and color.
Absolutely. But I think the question was about how do I begin to do this? And I think it's coming from an engineer's perspective. And
okay.
if I'll be the representative of the engineers trade union here in this place. And I think the question was about, you know, as an engineer, I know that you guys you spend years and years, you've got all this technology, you've got all of these algorithms, some really clever stuff going on. But as an engineer, like you said, I've got my little plug-in on my desk behind me, you can see it right there. And I just put my finger on the thing and I move it, and I can hear the object moving in the space. Now, I know there's incredible technology behind that, but as an engineer, that's basically the basic setup is you forget about your left-right bus, you forget about the graphic EQ and the limiter on the left and the right. You're working on with an object. And one of the interesting things I found about it is the difference, as I think Hugo mentioned it, between EQ and dynamics. When you have more space around each object, rather than fighting for space in a stereo bus, you approach the EQ and the dynamic response very differently. You're much lighter with the EQ and much lighter with the dynamics. Ralf, I haven't heard from you for a while. Would you agree with that?
I mean, you know, Yeah, I mean, my take on that one is how to dive into, producing, on an immersive system. And I think, taken, we have a given system already. It doesn't matter what it is. I think the first thing that you have to really, think through is the picture of what you want to achieve, right? And then you have to think about, the tricks and the goes, don'ts, and don't do's in a system specifically. For instance, if you're thinking about, moving things around in a spatial audio system, you have a kind of some certain limitations. Given you have a big stage, yeah, we're not talking Legoland, we're talking about a proper stage, which is 20 meter wide or 60 feet wide. And if you're talking about an immersive system, you have, of course, the travel time between the right edge of the stage and the left stage of edge of the stage. So if you have the bass player over here and the drum kit over here, it will probably work in just one direction, but it will never work somewhere else. So you have to really think about, which instruments have to be time-wise closer together to maintain a correct timing throughout the entire system. Right.
Yeah.
And from there, if you have put together your bases, you're just, let's say, your carpet, where you put your production, and then you can start to decorate it with the different instruments and stuff like that. And then you have different tools to make it wider, to make it more narrow, to focus on things a little bit here and there. But the most important thing is think about your rhythm section. Think about what has to be time-wise tied together in your setup, and start from there, and then slowly build it up around that to create a mix which is working in all directions. Yeah, you have all of a sudden you have the opportunity, but also the threat that you have different listening directions. And no matter what algorithm you're using, if you have a source over here and another over here, you have to be careful that you don't have the mix falling apart because of timing issues.
Yeah, because sound's really slow, right? That's a huge problem for us. Yes. Carry on, Hugo. You were going to jump in.
Yeah, and Ralf is totally right. What he's saying, these are some good pinpoints that you're starting to mix. I take the example of the drum kit. Do you really want to declare the drum kit as individual instruments, start to put them all over? No. The answer is probably no. You may be dealing with the drum as a stereo stem. Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe you like to have your snare and your toms at the extreme opposite of the space. But
we have to be a little bit careful, Hugo, by that. If you're talking about immersion and transparency, in the ideal world, you want to have everything separate, but you want to have it close together, right?
Yeah, close together, exactly.
Stamps can be a quite nice way to make things easier. Absolutely right.
Yes, as the first step. And I wanted to use the example because the question is, well, how do I start? And number one, I probably don't have a renderer in my home as a mixing engineer. Number two, if I'm lucky, I have a console, but chances are I don't even have a console. I'm kind of starting. And we have experienced this, we have concrete cases where, and to me, the best way to start this is either with, it could be a studio session in a DAW, but it could be ideally a live recording. And if you have the advantage of a post fader one, taking this is a good way to start. And with FLUX, the Spat Revolution from the FLUX Circam, we have this integration to various digital audio workstation, and that's actually a good place to start. Why and how? Well, take that session, as stems or individual objects, bring them into, the tool. In this case, we've been using Spat to do this, and then you can start to create the first intention. You can actually work this with the artist. We had specific case of people working with the artist, starting some intentions here. In binaural audio, if that's only what you can afford, you're on ears only, or if you have more speakers, that's great. But start to actually build some intentions. And then, you can start with this. You can kind of get some validation because, some of those decisions may be, tied to the artist as well, right? You don't want to start to spin any instruments anywhere, but maybe you want to do some in the bridge, play with the vocal and do something or whatever it is. And then once you've got these first intentions started, you can then actually kind of connect back to your real environment by having basically starting point. And we've done this where, we open our renderer and we push what was created in the DAW as far as spatial parameters, position of objects. Let's start with that. You basically push this, you know, in the case of the S6L integration, for example, you basically push this, you can do a snapshot capture, and you have a start point. Okay, my start point for someone, my bridge for someone, whatever. You can have these start points, and then you're with the gear, and then you're in pre-production, then with the artist, and then you are refining, you know, your mix. So, and we have done this with, you know, on smaller scale, you know, systems, and on a larger one as well, you know. So the ability to be able to create offline is obviously critical when you don't have access to the gear, you know. And most people don't have a renderer, an hardware renderer sitting in their home. So
I've got a feeling that's going to be some kind of tipping point, right? When we can start to do this from our home without having to have a renderer actually in the house. I mean, as part of it's about reimagining the mix, isn't it, Sherif? Are we reimagining how we mix audio together?
I was gonna just actually add, because now that we have the speakers and we have the, let's say, the virtual speakers, the binaural, and the people are already getting the good hints how to get started with that. I think the most important thing is really to just focus on the feeling and focus at the, let's say, what you would like to present to the listener. It's not about really being able to use this amazing positioning everywhere and the freedom of having things moving around. If you're painting a picture, try to paint a picture that is absolutely gelled together, that provides you with a spacious, let's say, experience of the content that you're listening to. Don't get tracked out with all the possibilities that this technology gives you, from having things just flying around all the time, moving from left to right, above you, behind you, underneath. Just focus really on the value of the music content, and spend your time, because there are a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into when you get lost in all these technology possibilities that will end up really dismantling any mix. I think it's about not having all this music scattered around. It's just, you need to listen to it as a one source, if you wish. And that is really, really important at the start, not to get sidetracked with the possibilities that you get, because there are all sorts of means to control any object in your mix, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff, but this distracts from the actual thing. I like to compare it, as you know, Rob, we've spoken about this before, about moving lights and about the distractions that this takes you away from the actual core of the performance, which is to enjoy the music. And it's the same with actually mixing audio. You're painting this picture, you're finalizing a picture, and you're not just into trying to use the technology to show off all that this technology can do.
Yeah. I guess that depends on the context as well, doesn't it? You know, whether you're mixing if you mix a string quartet, you don't want a second violin flying around the ceiling, obviously. But maybe if you're mixing an electronic,
maybe it's exciting the first time you mix a string quartet, and you can have the first violin walking around all the time. It's so boring. I think there are definitely there are moments in a performance where you can put this accentuations with something that suits the content, but it's not just using this because
it's not just a one-trick pony. It's not. It's although you can do it, although you can move objects around in space, it's more about being able to control the way that the audience hears and experiences the audio.
And it's not about making it gimmicky either, you know, because obviously it's going to be fun for 5 minutes, and then, you know, it's like, okay, what's
5
the
seconds.
point? Yeah, well, 5
I
seconds.
lasted.
Okay.
I lasted a good week before I got bored of it.
but then the movements, then the movements are actually can be important. If you've got a guitar solo and your guitar player is coming to different position, obviously there's times where, you know, you may want to be moving that instrument. You know, if
That's
he
an
is moving.
audiovisual, I'm sorry
Yes.
to jump. That's an audiovisual alignment that
Correct.
is actually serving exactly the purpose of the music. But
Yep.
what I might be talking about is when someone is starting off without even performers in his home experimenting with that, is just to focus on the core of the music. And
okay, so that's an interesting point, because I know some of you guys we've had immersive setups at a festival or something like that, and so you've had people walking up to the desk, and they don't even know they're going to be mixing immersive. I know you've had this experience, Sherif. Can you tell me a little bit of that? So I'm an engineer. I'm walking up to you and I go, "Hi mate, how's it going? Here's my input list." And you go, "Oh, by the way, it's not a left and a right. It's an immersive audio thing today." And so talk me down, because and now I'm like,
I had actually, once again, it's years and years ago. It's a very renowned festival in Paris for jazz. And we had this 5-array frontal system in a venue, maybe for about 3,000 people. And the luxury that we had back then is that the infrastructure of the show was already in the venue. So even though there were also really famous musicians coming to play, they used the mixing consoles and the stage boxes, microphones. They used what was provided by the festival. So engineers come who usually have a sound check for maybe 15 minutes before they can start the show. And you tell them, by the way, forget about the pan pot on your mixing console. We have a much, much more versatile tool here, where they're immediately like, no, I just want my left, right. I said, like, okay, don't worry. There is here exactly the pan pot that you have. We have the same here. So we'll just, for a start, use the pan on the controller that we provide you with. And the only difference is that not only you will hear this object coming from that direction, but everyone in the audience, no matter where they're seated, they will hear that from there. So don't get lost in all the functionalities that you can do. Just use the pan as you're using it, and that will already be a lot better than the normal left-right system. So really quickly, with setting up pans, even almost translating the pan values as they have them on the pan pot somewhere in this panorama that we have, then starting to listen to a couple of minutes, then you start telling them about, like, maybe it's better to move something or add width to something, because that will fit the content much better. The acceptance then, after the initial couple of minutes, when they actually hear the mix coming in this almost the same way, but much more less dynamic and EQ necessary to really hear everything, they start to accept the fact, well, actually, it's easy, it's beneficial for all the audience, and that's whom we are mixing for. And they will immediately accept that and lose this first, resistance to, no, I'm not used to this. I don't want that.
Okay.
So it was quite positive with, let's say, 10 days of festival with at least 3 to 4 bands per day that were involved in this festival to really experience this before even anyone heard about it.
Which is an interesting example, George. Sorry to jump in. Coming back to the question of the workflow of a system and how to approach it, and how easy it is. And my saying is, beside of all of that we just put together, the first thing of all is no fear. Go up to a system and just use your instrument, set up the band as you would like to have it in your normal setup, and just listen to it, and you will easily and immediately experience that the transparency, that the entire process of mixing is getting so much easier because you have all the transparency of the system. You don't need to unmask things all the time. They are all there where they should be. And from that point of view, I've also experienced that, on festivals, especially with younger guys coming up and going up to the mixing board, they are immediately into the system and try to play with it. And they just start, with the very center and the basic setup of the band. And then they start moving things around and trying to achieve, certain things. And I think this is the most fascinating moment. Once they just got into the system, they just have it all together. And then they just start taking I remember you, Robbie, when we did our test together, you started exactly the same way. We just put the thing together, and all of a sudden you understood, you felt comfortable, and then you just used the system. And this is, for my understanding, is going so quick, that is just fascinating, because again, you're listening to something that is absolutely natural for you. This is something you expect. And if you move the thing over here, it's there. If you move it over there, and all of a sudden you know how to play with things. And
there was in fairness, there was a couple of challenges I found. Okay, so in a little bit of pushback. When I went from a stereo mix to the immersive, I think I've already told you guys this story, but I had one song where I had a little bongo in it, and it sounded terrible in immersive, and then I realized it's because I'd done the bus fed thing, and I'd boosted the high mid to make it cut through, and you don't need to do that in immersive because it's got literal space around it, not just frequency space around it. And the other thing that I just wanted to think about was that, because I'm a kind of, although I work with experimental bands in the main, guys who are on the kind of cutting edge of like what you'd roughly call rock or dance music. There's a certain amount of there's something like the Keith Richards thing about that where instruments overlap, that's where the rock and roll happens. And somehow with this, if you have too much space, if they're too clean and separate, it's not. I was searching for a little while to make it dirty enough. Any thoughts on that, Hugo? How do you make it dirty in immersive
why did you
audio?
Pick me? Why did you pick me on that one?
I don't know, because you get a rock and roll kind of a guy. I don't know. I just randomly, because you hadn't said anything for a while, I was just trying to include you in the conversation.
Okay. So
you don't have to.
Yeah, no. But to me, there's not too much separation. There's not that much room. You're not talking about 360 degree. You still got a stage. You still got what's that opening in front of you at 90 degree, 100 degree, whatever. You still, there's not that room to play. And that, to me, it doesn't make it. It doesn't make it less dirty because you started to separate. I don't think we absolutely need it to totally, in my experience, and for every time I've heard it. And actually, you know what? You're making everything shine like they should be shining, and not actually look for it. So, and then obviously all the spectral, decision that you had to make to fit it in your stereo are no longer applying. So you're just finding back the natural side of it. So, yeah, I'm kind of stuck on that vision anyway. So
no, listen, I'm with you. I ended up flattening off EQs and backing off compressors. That was the main thing I seemed to be doing, because I didn't need to do the kind of things that you do to make the mix work in a basically mono system in an arena, right?
And we can even talk about Reverb Engine. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Ralf.
But Robbie, if you want to make it dirty, you have all the possibilities. If you want to play around, and again, if you're a little bit comfortable with the system, if you want to really make it dirty and sounding like a cheap radio, what have you, put them all on one position, all the sources that you have, and you have this cacophony of something, and then you just move them apart again, and you get the transparency back. Hey, what an enlightening moment is what you're getting when you're doing that. So the possibilities of making things dirty and just bring the cleanness back into it. It's just amazing. It's just fantastic. Just go for it.
I'll create you a dirty snapshot and I'll send it to you, or an event here. I'll just send it to you, Rob. You can fire the dirty mode.
Thanks,
No, Rob,
Hugo.
I think I know exactly what you're referring to. I think it's not about necessarily making dirty, but it's about like it needs really to be gelling together. And when you're separating things, and if you don't really pay much attention, then things could be poking out in an absolutely negative way because they distract really from the whole content. So this is the experience that you get, and I'm saying like just play, and try the tools that you're provided with. Try to get your vision, try to get what you have in mind, what you actually are striving to achieve. Try to do that without being pulled away because you're positioning things in a very, very exposed position with a as you explained, with a frequency boost that even makes that much, much worse. But I think if you like what you're listening to, you have finally reached this obsolescence stage of like you're mastering the tools, the new tools. It's quite a challenge really to learn how to use these tools, and this just happens with playing around with them and listening to what you're doing and not really focusing where a position is or where a value is or a parameter. You just use your ears again and you play with the tools to achieve the result that you're aiming for. And I think Hugo was mentioning like 30 or 40 or 90 degrees. We're not only talking about just a stage system, but you can have a fully immersive system that is surrounding all around you, and you can have multiple layers of elevation and overhead speakers. And this opens a huge canvas for you to position things in. And there is actually this very, very huge danger of scattering things around that end up really not giving you the experience that you would like to transport.
Yeah, I think it's like, like we work, we're the plugin company, right? We're Avid, Pro Tools, plugins. For people I always say to people, listen, we provide you all of the tools in the world, but you don't have to use all of them, and you have to use what you use, with your own taste and your own experience. So just because we got 1,000 plugins, there's 1,000 ways to mess up your mix if you don't do it right. And I think what you guys are doing is you're providing a whole new tool, a whole new way of thinking about the mix. And we can go horribly wrong with this, but we can make this can be a very, very special thing as well. Listen, we're running out of time. Ralf, any last thoughts? Before we call it a day, it's been just amazing. I can't believe we've done an hour and a half already. We've done an hour and a half.
We have another 5 hours to go, don't we?
So give us some thoughts. Where's immersive audio going in the future? How do you get involved in immersive audio? Maybe we could all have a quick last word on that. Ralf, start with you.
I mean, we ignited the candle. The candle is ignited, and I believe, we are just facing something which is unstoppable. You see it, in all the commercial devices coming up more and more and more. And as Sherif also, put out in Hugo, it is something which is now part of our world, and it will never ever disappear again. I think, we had on our list, we had the question if stereo is dead. And honestly, in a couple of years' time, probably yes. I mean, except probably vinyl records where you have this fixed format, but everything else where you can stream and send different metadata with it. I think, honestly, come on, guys, let's face the future. This will be, exactly what will happen. The spatial audio, 3D audio, immersive audio, call it how you want it. This will never go away. It will be kind of standard in the future.
Hugo?
Yeah. And to kind of continue on this, the fear, who said the word fear? Ralf said the word fear. So, and then it's exactly where it starts, it's like, there's no fear to have, Granted, there's a lot of parameters and a lot of things, around the subject, but it's as simple as, I say, declaring some of those channels to being objects and start small, starting small is the best beginning of it. And if you have the luxury to be able to use tools that can give you some, standalone pre-production offline, to get going, well, that's a good place to start. We do offer that. And yeah, there's never going back as far as I'm concerned. Is stereo dead? Well, stereo is not dead, but anyway, it's the opportunity to think object-based, and then whatever. If stereo remains, it remains, and if you need to do it because that's what the venue has, well, great. But it doesn't prevent you from thinking object and starting to work your actual workflow about objects. So, yeah. You even haven't talked about Reverb Engine, which
I know I meant to get to that.
Yeah, Sherif started to talk about putting box, behind you, and then we acoustic simulation that we all do. Yeah, it's just we said it. We needed 3 to 4 hours for that conversation.
Sherif, do you want to round things?
Yeah, I think a really important thing is that all the famous, let's say, musicians or producers or mixers, they have become famous because they didn't stick to any rule. They just done what they envisioned is their approach to creativity, and they followed a route and they came up with new means of expressing themselves. I think we should just keep experimenting and keep breaking rules, and Immersive is giving us even more possibilities to create something that we couldn't even think of just a few years ago. So I think just play, enjoy and play, and make the most of what your creative mind gives you as an idea. And I think all who are here try to provide you with all means to even go beyond what you have experimented with just before all these tools came out. So we are in heart, we are big boys that want to really play around and enjoy what they are producing and break the rules, play and bring something new to the table and challenge us, especially challenge us to provide you with something that can even fulfill your dreams. I think that's what we're dreaming, and we fulfilling our dreams, but we haven't fulfilled all your dreams yet. So Hugo will be on the route to fulfill your last dream you were speaking about.
Hallelujah.
Well, we look forward to some of those secret announcements soon. I think for me, the thing of our community, the men and women of our community, they're going to produce extraordinary things that none of you guys have even imagined. So that's the beautiful thing about creating a tool, creating a creative tool that we've done with this, and you guys are doing with speakers and software, is that the creative tool that you imagine and the creative tool that you produce, and then we put it in our community, and our community is so creative and so talented and so imaginative, and it just goes beyond anything you'd even conceived of, right? And that's the most exciting thing. I'm looking forward to seeing our peer group doing extraordinary things as we move forward into this brave new immersive world. It just leaves for me to say thank you so much, guys, for coming and having this conversation. As ever, you're some of my favorite people to talk with in the whole world, and thank you so much for coming and having this conversation. Thanks, Chris, for being here. And with that, man, please check out Elisa, Soundscape, FLUX, Spider Village. There's videos and stuff, and lots of hard information. We've been more philosophical than hard information on this webinar, but the hard information is out there. That's it. Thank you again. We'll see you the next time. Okay.
Thanks very much for the invite, Rob, and it was a pleasure joining this Illuster circle. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
thanks a
everyone.
lot, Robbie, for that one, and also thank you, to the folks outside at the screen, for just joining us and listen to what we had to say. And I hope we meet in another immersive world quite soon. Have a good one. Cheers.
Cheers,
Bye, everyone.